Have you ever sat by the bedside of someone you love, watching them suffer, wishing with all your heart that you could do something to make them well? In one quiet house in the small town of Capernaum, such a moment was unfolding. But this time something extraordinary was about to happen. Jesus had just left the synagogue where he taught with authority. The people were amazed, but instead of withdrawing to rest, he walked straight into a home where someone was hurting. The woman lying there was not a public figure. She was not rich or powerful or famous. She was the mother-in-law of a fisherman named Peter. She had a fever, nothing more was said. No crowds were watching, no grand display, just a moment of quiet suffering seen by the Savior. And what happened next was one of the most intimate and powerful moments in the Gospels. This story isn't about headlines or thunder from heaven. It's about the God who walks into your house, sees your pain, and reaches out with healing in his hands. Today we begin a journey into this short, often overlooked moment, a moment that reveals the heart of Christ, the dignity of the unseen, and the miracle hidden in everyday life. Are you ready to see how one gentle touch from Jesus changed not just a woman's body, but a family, a town, and perhaps you? The story unfolds in Capernaum, a modest fishing village along the northwestern coast of the Sea of Galilee. It's a quiet place, but it would soon become one of the most significant locations in the ministry of Jesus. Capernaum was more than just a town. It became known as Jesus' second home, Matthew 4:13, and the central stage for many of his miracles. On a Sabbath day, as recorded in Mark 21:28, Jesus entered the synagogue of Capernaum. There he astonished the people with his teaching. Unlike the scribes, Jesus taught with authority. During that service, he also performed a dramatic miracle, casting out an unclean spirit from a man in the congregation. Word of this spread quickly throughout the region. After the synagogue service, Jesus, accompanied by his first 4 disciples, Peter, Andrew, James, and John, left the place of worship and went to Peter's home just a short walk away. The homes of that time were humble stone structures with flat roofs and open courtyards. Peter's house likely served as a meeting place for early believers and may have been large enough to accommodate small gatherings. Inside that home, Peter's mother-in-law lay sick with a high fever in Luke 4:38. The physician records that the fever was great, indicating its severity. In the first century, a fever was no minor ailment. Without access to modern medicine, even common illnesses could lead to death, especially in older adults. Her condition was not simply discomfort, it was urgent. The disciples immediately told Jesus about her. There was no formal request, no loud prayer, no dramatic plea, just a simple presentation of the need. That in itself is a lesson. Sometimes faith is simply telling Jesus what's wrong. Then Jesus approached her. He could have spoken from a distance, but instead he went to her bedside, took her hand in his own, and helped her to sit up. Mark 1:31 describes it powerfully. So he went to her, took her hand, and helped her up. The fever left her, and she began to wait on them. In that one sentence, we witness the full process of divine grace. Jesus comes near. He touches the one who is suffering. He lifts her up. She is immediately healed. She responds with service. There were no elaborate rituals, no long sermons, just presence, just compassion, just a hand reaching out from the Son of God. And the moment the fever left her, she did not lie in bed to recover. She immediately began to serve them, a sign not only of her physical recovery, but of her heart's gratitude. In Jewish culture, serving guests was an act of hospitality and honor. For her, it became an act of worship. This miracle is often overlooked, yet it reveals so much about the heart of Jesus. He was not just the savior of crowds. He was the healer of individuals he cared for. Mothers-in-law for the elderly, for the forgotten, for the ones behind closed doors. Later that evening, Mark 1:32-34 tells us that, as the Sabbath ended, people began to bring all who were sick or demon-possessed to that very house. The whole town gathered at the door. But the first miracle, the one that opened the way for others, happened quietly in a private room with no crowd watching. That's where his compassion began. When we slow down and meditate on the miracle of Jesus healing Peter's mother-in-law, we discover that beneath the surface of this simple story lies a profound message about faith, intimacy with God, and the very nature of Christ's mission. First, notice the humble setting. Unlike other miracles performed in crowded places, this one happened inside a private home. There were no religious leaders watching, no grand audience, no one recording history, but this miracle was no less important. If anything, it revealed a powerful truth. Jesus does not need a stage to perform wonders, he only needs presence. Many people wait for a big spiritual moment, an altar call, a retreat, a crisis. But the Lord often works in the quiet corners of our lives, just as he walked into Peter's home. He wants to walk into ours, not just into the church or public gatherings, but into our private spaces, our relationships, and our pain. Secondly, we see the compassion of Jesus in action. He didn't just heal her with a word. He went to her, took her hand, and helped her up. In a time when social and religious customs limited physical interaction between men and women, especially between rabbis and sick women, Jesus broke cultural barriers to extend divine kindness. This reveals an essential aspect of Christ's character. He was always willing to cross boundaries for love. He did not avoid the sick or the outcast. He touched them. He drew near. And in this simple act of physical contact, we find theological beauty. Jesus is not a distant Savior. He is Emmanuel, God with us who enters our suffering rather than avoiding it. Third, the miracle teaches us about the response of faith. As soon as Peter's mother-in-law was healed, she began to serve. She didn't wait to be asked. She didn't need a recovery period. She responded naturally with gratitude expressed through action. This shows us that true healing always leads to transformation. God doesn't just heal us so we can feel better. He heals us so we can live differently. When Christ touches our lives, it demands a response, not just words but service, and not out of obligation but out of love. It's also worth noting that this woman had no recorded conversation with Jesus. She didn't ask for healing. She didn't demonstrate faith through words. Yet her healing came because of the faith of others, those who brought her situation to Jesus. This is an important reminder. Intercessory faith matters. Sometimes people are too weak, too tired, or too broken to pray for themselves. But the prayers and faith of family and friends can still move the heart of God. Moreover, this miracle takes place at the beginning of Jesus' public ministry. It sets the tone for everything that follows. Before healing the masses, before facing opposition, before preaching on mountains. Jesus started with a woman in a back room. That's the kind of Savior we serve. He values the hidden, the humble, the quiet moments. He sees the individual. And isn't that encouraging? In a world obsessed with platforms and visibility, Jesus reminds us that true power is revealed in private faithfulness. We don't need to be seen by crowds to be seen by God. From a theological standpoint, this miracle encapsulates key aspects of the gospel incarnation. Jesus enters the physical world, touches real suffering. Compassion, he acts not from obligation, but from love. Redemption, he lifts the broken and restores their dignity. Mission, those who are touched by Christ are called to serve. This story also illustrates how healing leads directly into purpose. Peter's mother-in-law didn't just return to her old life. She stepped immediately into action. Her service was not just cultural hospitality, it was a sign of discipleship. She became the first person in the Gospel of Mark to model what it means to be healed by Jesus and to respond with commitment. Lastly, let's reflect on the symbolism of the hand. Jesus took her hand. In the Bible, hands are symbols of strength, power, and relationship. The hand of God parted the Red Sea. The right hand of the Father is where Christ now sits in glory, and here the hand of Jesus raises a woman from sickness into service. We must ask, what is Jesus reaching out to lift in us today? What sickness, doubt, or apathy needs his touch? Are we willing to let him come that close? Faith is not just about believing in the miracles of the past. It's about inviting Jesus into our present, to our living rooms, our kitchens, our hospital beds, and letting him lift us by the hand that we too may rise and serve. To fully appreciate the significance of Jesus healing Peter's mother-in-law, we must understand the cultural, social, and historical setting in which this miracle took place. Capernaum, the town where this event occurred, was a small but strategically important fishing village on the northern edge of the Sea of Galilee. Archaeological discoveries confirm that it was a vibrant community with modest stone houses, narrow alleyways, and a central synagogue. This synagogue, possibly the very one Jesus taught in that morning, stood as the religious heart of the village. Peter's house, where the miracle took place, has been identified by scholars and archaeologists as one of the oldest Christian gathering sites. A house in Capernaum near the synagogue was expanded and adapted into a meeting place as early as the 1st century, and many believe this is the location of Peter's home. Homes at the time were typically small, with multiple generations living together. The house likely included a courtyard, several small rooms, and possibly a rooftop area. Hospitality was a sacred duty in Jewish culture. Meals were shared communally, and guests were expected to be served promptly and respectfully. The role of a mother-in-law or elder woman in the household was essential. She would oversee the kitchen, welcome guests, and ensure the home functioned smoothly. This context deepens the story. Peter's mother-in-law was not just sick. She was unable to fulfill her role in a culture where contribution defined value. Illness isolated her, not only physically, but socially. She couldn't serve, welcome, or care for her family. In a society without social safety nets, every hand mattered. Her sickness likely brought shame and sorrow to the household. Moreover, the 1st century Jewish world placed strong emphasis on ritual cleanliness and gender roles. Rabbis especially avoided physical contact with women, particularly those who were sick or unclean. That Jesus would not only enter the home but also touch a sick woman was a quiet act of rebellion against societal expectations and a bold act of love. His healing touch restored not only her body, but also her place in the household and her dignity in the community. She could once again fulfill her role, not because society demanded it, but because she had been restored by grace. Finally, it's important to note that the Sabbath had just ended when Jesus healed her. The Sabbath was sacred, a day of rest from all work, including healing, unless it was life-threatening. Jesus, by choosing to heal on the Sabbath, subtly challenged the legalism of the day, reminding the people that compassion comes before ritual and that the law was made for man, not man for the law. Though this miracle happened over 2,000 years ago, its message still speaks directly to our lives today. In a world filled with sickness, isolation, and silent suffering, the story of Jesus healing Peter's mother-in-law offers us powerful lessons of hope, compassion, and what it truly means to live a life touched by Christ. The woman in this story wasn't famous or influential. She didn't speak. She didn't even ask to be healed. And yet Jesus saw her. He came into her home, acknowledged her condition, and touched her life. In our world today, many people suffer in silence, physically, emotionally, or spiritually. But this miracle reminds us that Jesus sees every burden. We are never invisible to him. He enters our private spaces and meets us where we are, even in moments no one else notices. No grand speeches were made. No complicated rituals were performed. Someone simply told Jesus about her illness. That act alone opened the door to healing. Often we overthink how to approach God, as if we need perfect prayers or powerful emotions. But sometimes the deepest faith is shown in quiet trust in telling Jesus what's wrong and believing he cares. When Jesus lifted her up, he restored more than her health. He restored her role, her dignity, and her ability to serve. In today's culture, where identity is often tied to productivity or external success, Jesus reminds us that true purpose begins with being made whole. His healing allows us to live again, not just for ourselves, but for others. As soon as she was healed, the woman began to serve. This wasn't about obligation, it was joy. In the same way, when we encounter Christ's mercy, we don't serve to earn his love. We serve because we've already received it. Gratitude becomes action, worship becomes work. True discipleship begins not just when we're blessed, but when we bless others in return. The miracle didn't happen in the temple or in a stadium, it happened in a home. Today, many people think spiritual moments only happen in church, but Jesus works in living rooms, kitchens, hospital beds, and even in our loneliness, he sanctifies the everyday places where we live. When we invite him into our homes and hearts, even the most ordinary day can become holy. Compared to raising the dead or feeding thousands, this miracle seems simple, but for one family, it changed everything. We must never despise the small mercies of God: a healed relationship, a peaceful night's sleep, a word of comfort. These are miracles too, and they remind us that no concern is too small for the Savior. The woman was healed not because of her words, but because others brought her need to Jesus. In our modern lives, we often forget the power of praying for one another. When someone you love is too weak to pray, your faith can still reach Jesus on their behalf. Love becomes a bridge to healing. This miracle teaches us that faith is not always loud, that healing is not always public, and that the most powerful moments with Jesus often happen when no one is watching. It reminds us to bring our families, our illnesses, our quiet pains to the Lord, not with anxiety but with trust. And when He touches us, when He lifts us by the hand, we are not just called to feel better, we are called to rise up and serve. Perhaps as you've listened to this story, something inside you began to stir. Maybe it reminded you of someone close to you who was sick, discouraged, or distant from God. Or perhaps in a quiet and honest moment, you realize that you are the one lying down, not on a literal bed, but in a place of emotional fatigue, spiritual apathy, or silent sorrow. And maybe you've been there for a long time. The beautiful truth is Jesus sees you. He saw Peter's mother-in-law lying in a quiet corner of her home. No crowds, no noise, no pleading, just a woman suffering in silence. And what did He do? He approached. He took her hand. He lifted her up. He still does the same today. He is not afraid of your weakness. He is not offended by your silence. He is not waiting for you to impress Him with prayers or promises. He comes close to those who are willing to be seen, not by the world, but by Him. Have you ever thought, I'm not worthy of His help, or I've gone too far? Friend, you're exactly the one He came for. You don't have to be strong. You don't have to be ready. You don't have to fix yourself before you invite Him in. All you need is a heart that is open, a heart that whispers, Jesus, I need you. What's keeping you lying down? Is it guilt? Fear, doubt? Is it a wound from the past that never healed? Is it exhaustion from trying to carry everything alone? Whatever it is, Jesus wants to lift you from that place. When He enters a home, things change. When He reaches out a hand, healing begins. When He calls your name, He also gives you new purpose. And He's not done with you. You are not forgotten. You are not too far gone. You are not invisible to Him. The same Jesus who healed in Peter's home is walking into your life right now. Not with condemnation, but with compassion. Not with questions, but with an invitation. He is offering His hand. Will you take it? If you've never invited Jesus into your life before, this moment can be the beginning. And if you once walked with Him but have drifted, this is your invitation to return. Let Him lift you. Let Him heal you. Let Him give you a reason to rise again, not just to live, but to live for Him. This story of a quiet healing in a small home is not just about the past. It's a personal invitation to you right now. We've seen how Jesus entered Peter's house, how He saw the mother-in-law lying in pain, how He gently reached out His hand, and how healing followed. That miracle wasn't loud, it wasn't public, but it changed everything. And that's the kind of miracle Jesus still does today. He comes into our homes, our hearts, our pain, and He brings wholeness. But He doesn't force His way in. He waits for the door to open. He waits for the invitation. So I ask you, have you invited Him in? Not just into your Sunday morning, but into your everyday life. Not just into your beliefs, but into your burdens. Into the parts of your story that you've kept hidden. The places you don't let others see. Jesus wants to enter those places. And when He does, He brings with Him everything you need: peace for your anxiety, grace for your guilt, purpose for your wandering, and healing for your heart. You may think, but I'm too broken. He says, I came for the broken. You may say, I've waited too long. He says, I've been waiting for you. You may whisper, I'm not enough. He responds, I am. This is your moment to respond. You don't need fancy words or a perfect past. You don't need to climb your way to God, because He already came down to you. The hand is already extended. The love is already offered. The door is already open. What will you do with Jesus? Will you let Him step into your life the way He stepped into that house? Will you allow Him to lift you from your place of weakness and give you strength again? This is more than emotion. This is transformation. And when He heals, it doesn't stop with you. Just as Peter's mother-in-law rose and began to serve, your healing becomes your testimony. Your encounter becomes someone else's invitation. Your yes becomes someone else's hope. So here's your call to action. If you've never said yes to Jesus before, say it now. Say it with a whisper or a shout, but say it with your whole heart. If you've walked away, come back. The same Jesus who healed then is still healing now. And if you've been healed, then rise and serve. There's someone waiting for you to step into their story with compassion. And one more thing, share this message. Share it with someone who needs to hear that Jesus sees them, loves them, and wants to lift them up. You never know how one video, one moment, one conversation can lead to a miracle. Because faith doesn't stop at being healed. It begins again in service. Just like her, may your story not end in the bed, but at the table, serving others, living boldly, and showing the world what Jesus can do. So don't just remember this story, become it.